So like you said, I'm Jeremy Wilson. I'm from Southern Illinois. We farm about 1,200 acres, corn, soybeans, and recreational wheat. And I say recreational wheat because we have 40 head of recreational cattle and need hay and straw. We do run some double crop soybeans and other things, but primarily for straw and hay for the cattle. Just so everyone understands, I'm from the land of dirt, not soil. Okay? So if you think about Illinois, and I'm an Illinois farmer, no, I'm not one of those guys with topsoil this deep about the color of the frame of your chair at all. It's closer to the color of my pants that I have on today, because I'm going to talk about some of the real data off our farm and how we're using technology and the ROI of that technology, return on investment that we're seeing. Also, I'm going to hit on just the overall return on investment of farms and how technology can be driven to make those decisions. So let me ask some questions to start off with. Who thinks $6.50 corn and $12 soybeans are going to be back in the next few months? Anybody? Probably not. So when we look at these economics, the question comes up, how many of you calculate the ROI on every acre of your farm and fields? If you're using Slido, that question's up there now. If you go to the polls, that question's asked. How many of you calculate that? If you're not using Slido, you can raise your hand. Kaylee's going to give us some feedback on answers. Are we getting any? Okay. All right. You have 4. Okay. So I think that's probably a pretty common answer. And so my boss at Crop IMS, his name's Don Bierman. Probably if I have a mentor in my career, probably him. So I asked him the question, because this ROI thing comes up a lot. And we calculate ROI on every acre of every field, and we do it because we got technology to be able to do it. I said, well, what makes a good farmer? And so he started off and he gave me 4 responses. The first 2, I don't know, but we'll get to the good ones at the end. His first comment was, someone who understands continual improvement. If you're a farmer or work with farmers, do you understand continual improvement? I think we have to. So I wrote that one off. His second one is someone who strives to extract every dollar of value from every acre that they farm. Well, that's a no-brainer. Why are we in this business? I didn't like that one. Here's where we got some good ones. Someone who knows more about their acre than their competitor knows about their acre. So when we farm, we're competing with our neighbors. Whether we like it or whether we not, we compete with them. And how can we know more about our land and the land that we farm than our competitors do? Data and technology lets us do that. And the fourth one is probably the best. I've explained the soils that I farm. Someone who can produce a profit even on the worst acre in the county. How many farmers we got in the crowd? Several. Thank you. So are any of you like me that have probably some of the worst acre in the county? Yeah? Exactly. So how can we take technology and data and create profit from that? If I think there's something that makes a good farmer, I thought I'd probably like that last one the best. For full disclosure, in the county I call home, Richland County, Illinois, I'm pretty fortunate. I probably farm some of the best soil in that county. But our farm borders Richland and Jasper County. When I get in Jasper County, it's clearly the worst soil in that county. Why my family didn't go about 30 miles north before they set roots down 150 years ago, I'll never know. We're talking 50 to 60 bushel difference in corn yields, probably 5 to 10 bushels different in soybean yields. So I got to understand that one really well. So the tools we use on our farm, and what I'm going to talk about throughout this presentation. We do intense soil sampling, variable rate apply every crop nutrition product we put out, variety mapping to calculate yield by hybrids and yield by soil types and yields by a lot of other things, but those are the key ones. And then we also do application data to document crop protection products. Not only to document it, but also to get learnings from it. Does all that come easy and cheap? No. Does some of it take a little extra effort? Absolutely. So why do I invest in technology? Why do I invest at the level I have? And I haven't said it yet, but I'll tell you right now because it's a pretty good time to stop. Every single vehicle that pulls into our field's got an RTK steering system. Every piece has some type of recording on it, whether it's we do very little tillage. We're primarily a no-till operation, a min-till in some cases. We have RTK level steering and data collection on every single thing we do. If we walk in that field to scout something, we got a mobile device to capture some of that data. We capture every single event that happens in our field. And why do we do it? Here's why. We have to build history over time. It gives us the necessary information we need for analysis and reporting. But here's the big one, to verify agronomic changes. I love my crowd. I've got 2/3 farmers. Raise your hand if somebody has come up to you in the last 2 months and had the next product that's going to save the world. Am I alone? No, I'm not. I'm seeing some hands. So even if we invest in one of those and we're not using technology and data to validate what we did, how do we know the real agronomic change that that product had? I can make the case we can make some guesses without it, but clearly I'm as passionate and dedicated in hardware and technology the way I am because I want to completely verify those agronomic changes. I'll tell you right now, we got involved in technology in 2001. I tell the story every time I speak. We installed our very first yield monitor on September the 11th, 2001. Anybody remember that day? Me and my dad and 2 guys walked in our shed at 6 o'clock Central Time. Never left till about 8:30 Central because we had 2 yield monitors to do and neither one of us really had a clue what to do. I walked in the house. My wife says, "Oh my Lord, where have you been?" "Been at Dad's." "Well, do you know what's going on in the world?" "Well, kind of pretty day outside. What else should I know?" I spent the next 6 hours watching replays on every TV station you could find about what went on. That's when we got involved. Have we made agronomic changes since then? Oh my lands, I can't even begin to document the list of things we've changed. You can all laugh at me, everyone does. But the last reason I do it is I think it potentially increases the land value when I can document high quality production. God forbid the day comes I ever have to sell our land or we divest the farm. That day may come, we never know. What's my land worth if I can document my production and what I've done to the next guy that wants it? I think those numbers are real. So ultimately why I do it. Everyone's heard of Liebig's Law? Everyone's heard of that? You remember when I'm looking for the law of minimums? I'm worried about this guy right here. Those other 3 holes in my bucket mean nothing to me. I got to identify what's my limiting factor to yield. Could be fertility. Could be variety selection. Could be even some other factors. I don't know what those are unless I'm collecting good data. And sometimes it's kind of hard to calculate that return on investment occasionally in some of this because we find some obscure things that's really hard to quantify in a dollar amount. But I'll begin to talk about some of those in a minute. We do have another Slido question. Is it running now, Kaylee? So anyone on Slido? I believe my next question was, got to think about that. How many people understand the cost per acre of the hardware they use or technology they use on their farm? What do you think that costs you per acre? I think I give you a range of 0 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, and 9 and above. Anyone got any guesses? Have you ever run the numbers?
This is a yes, no.
Oh.
Have they calculated your next one?
Okay, so the first one is, have you calculated it first? How many people have calculated what technology cost you? Anyone responded to that one?
7 and no.
No? So then the next question, if you want to go ahead and put it up, what's that cost? Have you thought about it? What's that next piece of technology or data cost? Were you getting any responses yet on guesses? Can I pick on somebody? Anyone want to volunteer? They got a guess? Nobody? No class participation. We have 6. 7. Yes, I would agree with that. And my next slide is going to address that. What's the average? Good job. We're going to get to that. So let's just run the numbers, okay? So I went back to my hardware people that work for Crop IMS and said, give me some numbers. I didn't want to use my own because Dad gets kind of sensitive when I start talking really dark details of his farm. So I left him alone. They just told me an RTK steering system, give or take $12,000. Electric planter controls around $32,000. Some form of down pressure, hydraulic, pneumatic, I don't care, around $16,000. Yield monitoring, $36,000. For a grand total of $63,600. Huh? $3,600. I'm sorry. $3,600. My apologies. So, $63,600. So let's continue on. We want to say a 5-year useful life of that hardware, give or take. Field computer's getting to be an old man in 5 years. The other stuff's probably going to survive. So we're looking at $12,700 a year. Let's pick an average grower, 1,500 acres, give or take. So $8.48 an acre. So my hardware people say growers like yourselves are more than willing to make this investment in hardware. So where are we going to get $8.50 back? Let's go one step deeper, because I go even deeper in this. I get into data management services, and I do all this and use all these. Intensive soil sampling and recommendations, I pay about $250 an acre per year. Training and support to help make sure all my guys, and I haven't told my story on one of our hired hands named Steve, and I may not today, but about $4 is what I pay for that. Comprehensive data analysis, another $2. So my total data management package that I work through Crop IMS on, give or take $8.50 an acre. Those numbers are going to change depending on where you're at. But the way this works out is I got to somewhere find what? $17? I can tell you I have no problems with that whatsoever. And we're going to break those out here in a little bit and tell you that the data management side or even the hardware side, I mean, I really have all the hardware I need. I don't need a whole lot more. But I can make the case I can return that pretty quickly, and I've got one slide that will show you that real simply. So why do I invest in all these things? The premise of everything I do is about collecting every piece that I can. So I start off with my soil data. Some of these things I can change, some of them I can't. Things like soil tests, EC data, soil EC, topographical data. I'm going to build me a house here. So the soil is the things I can't change. On that I got to put a floor, or this building I'm going to build. The next one's understanding quality data collection. I'm not going to get into that here. That's an hour presentation in and of itself. You probably can't endure me for 2 hours. But my first wall of my house is planting data. My second wall is fertility data. And I put the roof of my house of yield data. I'm going to tell you, if you're going to start calculating ROIs on your farms, this is where you have to start. This is your first house you build on top of every field and every farm. Now, we collect other things. I told you we collect crop protection application data. We collect scouting data. Do a little bit in imagery. I don't do a ton there. We collect what tillage we have to do. We collect all that. I'm not fortunate to have irrigation, but irrigation may be another one. I'm going to tell you now, Varus data is another layer here that we're collecting, and I'll get to a slide of why we're deploying Varus data. But this is my house I build on every single field. And it takes commitment by every person on our operation. And the question I get, and you can ask questions in Slido, I can't believe no one said it yet, because it's normally happened, is how in the world do you get people on your farm motivated to do it? Well, it just takes a lot of practice and a lot of preaching. And clearly we're fortunate that most everyone that works on our farm has some land of their own. That's kind of why they work for Dad. He trades labor for using equipment, and they've seen the results firsthand. Some guys have great commitment, are ready to do it. Others, we have to earn it. But what am I after? I'm looking to find this guy. What is my lowest hole in my bucket? What is my limiting factor to yield? I set all this up so you'll listen. I think most of the rest of my slide is all pictures now because I want to use real examples and apply real numbers to return on investment and why we do what we do. I guess I got one more word slide. I forgot about this one. So why we use intensive soil sampling and recommendations. Why are we guessing what a crop's going to produce when we know what we took off of it? You know, for years we said, well, we think our corn will make 140, or we think it'll make 160. We think our soybeans will make this. Let's quit guessing. I've got a calibrated yield monitor with RTK. I know what that crop took off. Now, I'll make the case I'm struggling sometimes whether our recommendations are really accounting for the removal correctly yet or not. That's another hour discussion in and of itself. I'm happy to take on with anyone that wants to talk about it. You know, we're still getting the same amount of phosphorus and potassium in a kernel of corn or in a soybean. But is that plant using more now in these new racier hybrids we got in higher yielding environments? Are we taking more out of the soil till we get there? I don't know. But we still got to base it on something, and so we know what we took off. Technology on your farm today, you know, lets you to manage this crop nutrition better than you ever have in the past. Why not take advantage of it? And Dr. Fulton, I'll give him credit for this one. He was in a presentation, he sent this to me, and I've added it, and it's the foundation of why I do it. Over-applications of fertilizer can negatively impact the environment. Today it's important to utilize fertilizer in an efficient manner while ensuring efficient crop nutrition to maximize profitable yields. That's what we have to do. We got to be profitable at the end of the day. And how can we best utilize our fertilizer dollar? I talk about that 100 times, and then when you come, if you ever go find him and talk to him, you look at him and say, why do you do intensive management? Why did you spend the money? And I didn't put the slide in there. We got our own fertilizer truck for variable rate applications because we didn't want to depend on an input crop supplier to be there when we needed them to be. But he'll tell you, he says, you know what, I know every year I can spend X dollars on fertility and still be profitable. And when I lay my head on the pillow every night, I know I've utilized that fertilizer dollar the best I know how by using the technology we've got to calculate removal and use soil tests to put it where I need it the most. That's why we do it, and it falls right in line with what John says. So I'm going to use some examples. I didn't put this Slido question up there. How many people are doing intense soil sampling today and nutrient management? Several. So I'm going to be preaching. What's that? I'm not going to get in the grid soil sample or zone debate, but using some type of intensive sampling followed by variable rate applications behind it. Pretty good crowd. So I'm going to be preaching to the choir, but I'm going to use this example to show some ROI of deploying technology. So here's my 2013 P-test. Bear in mind this is pounds per acre, and I call it out on every slide, so to be parts per million divided by 2 to get back to that. This was my P-test. You know, on average, I'm pretty good. I'm shooting for a 50 P-test out there, probably you're just a 25. You know, on average, oh, that's right, this is an LED. I'm right on par where I need to be. But look at these areas up here in the red. My God, I've got some areas that are down pounds per acre test, down around 28 to 30. I've got some deficiencies there. So let's look at our yield data. 2005, I'm not at all embarrassed to put this map up there. That field averaged 103.36 bushel an acre. And I'm going to tell you, I can't believe the good Lord blessed me that much. Because if you knew the history of what happened, I planted that field 3 times. The third time I planted it, I didn't even get out of the field before I got another ½ inch of rain on top of it. So where I'm from, it's not a question of if you're going to replant, it's how much you're going to replant. And in 2015, I'd put 3 times the acres on my corn planter I ever had because we replanted every acre 3 times. So, I can't even believe, because I think the last time that got replanted was on June the 2nd or 3rd. Our final plant date for crop insurance is the 5th. I wasn't going back. And this big red hole, your red and yellow hole, it sat underwater for about a week after that last rain that hit us the day that I pulled out replanting it. After I replanted it the 3rd time, we got 2.5 inches of rain. We got a ½ inch as I pulled out of the field. The next day we got 1.5 inches, and 2 days after that we got another 1.25 inches. So, mighty fortunate I grew 103 bushel corn. And this green area at the top that went 150, 170, just a little bit of a raise in that field, just enough to let the water run off. This is a big hole, and I don't think I've got the map here where I talk about, looking at surface water management, but that's an important one. 2016, soybeans were much better, about 56 bushel an acre average. I want to call out one point here. I didn't show it as much on the last screen. But if you look here, the red areas or the low yields really only come in those 2 ponding areas. Look in this area where the red's at around the outside area of the field. I'm going to tell you, in 80% of our fields, probably throughout all of our fields, 80% of my yield drag comes in the outside 120 feet of the field. Don't think I know completely what the answer is. I've got a slide here to the end that I may have finally hit on something that may have a bigger return on investment than anything I'm going to show you yet today. I've only got 20 acres to show it, but I want you to look at this map because you're going to see it in another map I'm going to show you a little later on. But the outside borders of our field are a real struggle, and what do I need to do to fix those problems is a question we have to deal with every year. So, for my analysis of ROI, I just said, all right, I'm just going to take my yield data and no other layer, and this is what my variable rate fertilizer application would have looked like if I only took removal. No soil test built in this whatsoever, no other assumptions. I'm just saying I'm going to go back and put on what I took off. I'd have applied 18,000 pounds of DAP in 2017 with an average rate of around 86 pounds per acre. So here's that same map where I took the same yield, also incorporated my fertility data, and I didn't say it, but we are under a nutrient management plan. We got a comprehensive nutrient management plan on about a third to half of our farm because we get hog manure from a local hog farmer. So we're required to have that. And even before that, we still live by the philosophy if we had a 70 pound per acre soil test, we do not apply any phosphates because it's the right thing to do. And when you're in a CNMP, you don't get a choice. So here's that same map, taking my fertility layer and my removal and applying that requirement of no phosphorus greater than 70. I don't even know if I can read it if I wanted to. I want to say that was around 12,000 pounds was that wreck. I've got it on another slide when we get up here in a minute. So in my area, the next slide, and what this is here for, if you're not intensively managing fertility the way that I am, most growers are pulling 1 in 10 soil samples. 1 sample out of 10 acres. Some are down to 5 now. I didn't run that analysis of breaking my map down to 5, but I just took my intense soil samples and went and backed in and averaged those samples to create this 1 in 10 grid just to get a comparison of what that may look like and what I might have gained or lost if I would have chose to go a less intensive sampling scheme. And so if I do that, my average is still all the same. Nothing's changed. And in that philosophy, a lot of growers could make the case, well, you know, I really don't need any buildup there. I've already got a good soil test. I'm just going to put back what I take off. But when I go and lay these side by side, so now you look at my 10-acre grids and now you look at my 2.5s. Look at what I've missed. And I didn't try to calculate the ROI just on this part because it's a little more difficult. But that $2 to $3 investment I made for grid soil samplings, look at the value that brings to me in better understanding what my foundation is. Where do I need to maybe apply more or maybe you need to apply less? Because you apply my 70 to nothing, that really didn't change that a lot. I did miss one here. I'm over applying in that area. And I didn't calculate that into it. But what I did is calculate it here. So I just took a straight VRA application that was just removal, nothing else. That was my 9 ton of DAP. And these are numbers from last spring. These are close to what we paid. I don't know exactly. That was in the ballpark when I run these numbers after we applied those RECs last spring. And calculating the fertilizer cost, the application cost. I do have a higher application cost for the variable rate applied because of efficiencies and other things. So my total fertilizer cost for that plan was $4,479. I go back to my variable rate application with no build, greater than 70. My total rate there was 6 ton with application cost and everything. Because the way our retailer works, if you don't apply the acre, they don't bill you. That's why the application is less. Because you remember I had some 0 areas where there was no application of product whatsoever. And then the last is a flat rate of just saying I put back on, what I took off. And I took the normal mindset there that most growers, if a half the field like that is less than optimal, they would have put a little bit of build with it. That was incorporated in. So that worked out to a total build. Application is much less because they got a cheaper cost for applying flat rate fertilizer. I'm at $5,133. So if you just compare the two from what I really did, the VRA with no build over 70 compared to what I would have done if I had a flat rated that was a $20 an acre savings. I didn't rig those numbers. I had no idea they was going to turn out that way. I really figured they were going to be closer than that. But in that case, I invested, give or take, I put $16. If you take my data management and the technology it used to record all that data, I've still returned my investment right there just in my intensive fertilizer, in sampling and application of VRA potash, or DAP. The other piece that I left out of this, we do variable rate all of our anhydrous ammonia. Not because of some fancy algorithm that I've developed that I think I'm smarter than I ought to be. It's just simply going out and taking that variable rate DAP application that you saw back here. And anywhere I put no DAP, I put on a full load of anhydrous ammonia. And then anywhere I did put DAP, I take that nitrogen credit. Because there's never any cheaper nitrogen you're going to buy in this world than what you get out of DAP. A few cents a unit as compared to whatever your anhydrous rate is. So those are not calculated in there either, and what the agronomic benefit is. This is just the hard, real numbers of just the fertilizer savings alone. Questions before I move on to the next where I see return on investment from technology and data. God, that puts you to sleep already? Okay. Can I answer that on a later slide? Because yes, I'll get to that. Because we're taking multi-year analysis and looking at that and potentially, and because of some Verus data I'm going to show you as well, I'll tell you exactly why we're rethinking our grid size. Yes?
Do you apply your anhydrous from soil test or leach sample?
Today, it's just we're using Iowa State's new nitrogen calculator to determine what that rate should be. In my case, it was 180 units of actual in. So I'm just going out and put 180 actual on at this point. And then we have been going back in V8 to V10 with some supplemental nitrogen that has been based on an on-the-go sensor. So this is just so that I know when I pull out of my field in the spring that I've got a flat rate of nitrogen across that field, so I haven't introduced some potential deficiencies in nitrogen because of my nitrogen applications alone. We're letting sensors drive those decisions late season, but early season we're just going back with a flat recommendation across the board. I don't know if I included in the data set. Dr. Fulton has seen some trials I did from 2016 where we looked at different nitrogen rates and trying to understand whether this new nitrogen rec really fit our soils as needed to be. And I saw some substantial differences in soil available nitrogen and plant nitrogen in some different organic matter levels. If I picked up just even a half a point of organic matter, I saw a real significant difference in the amount of available nitrogen in the soil and also in the plant. So I'm not going to tell you I know exactly what I'm going to do with it yet, but if you wait till I get to my Verus slide at the end, you'll understand what my mindset is and what I'm thinking about investing in more technology because I believe I can see a return on investment. In the case of we repeat a 2016, where I think we mineralized more nitrogen than we ever had in my history, that soil organic matter is going to be a pretty important layer. And I think could really be a valuable piece to drive some of these nitrogen models we're looking at. And I've got some more thoughts on nitrogen and some potential return on investment around more of a true VRT N rate driven by algorithms and available data. Does that answer your question?
Do you have any watershed and lakes nearby that are having a loading problem that dictate anything you do?
Fortunately, today, no. We are looking at renting, or we have a landowner talking to us about renting a piece of land that sets right up against East Fork Lake. They have tossed this idea around twice. The NRCS is now considering doing a trial on that and doing more testing. That yes, very soon we may be impacted by that. But I'm going to say we do what we do in nitrogen for two reasons. Number one, because we're in a CNMP and have to in one case. But the other thing is just the right thing to do. You know, we are a nitrogen minimalist. I won't hide that for a minute. And I think if I showed you my data of where we've run late season nitrogen, I think that's why we're seeing such a response. Because we're putting a minimal amount to begin with, just for the reasons you say, even though we're not required to. Is the day coming where it's going to be a requirement? I think it absolutely will be. And we've already set the foundation. We're doing that right now. And I think, and part of another presentation I've got says I'm about to finally move to planning 4 applications of nitrogen throughout the year to spoon feed this throughout the season. My dad finally bought us a real sprayer. I'm so excited. We got the ability now to go in ourselves and put on some late season nitrogen. And so we had this discussion driving up on the phone with Dad yesterday about, you know, what are we going to do for some type of late season nitrogen application? Are we going to, you know, buy one of the systems that are available to put on this sprayer we have now? Are we going to build something? Because I think likely we are going to go to 4 applications throughout the year. Because I think it's the right thing to do. Now, I'm not going to be a guy that's going to go out and put 60% of my nitrogen load on pre-plant and wager my bet on a full side dress plan. But I think that you'll see me probably go out Potentially, what I feel like our plan will be, and I think there's plenty of return on investment for the extra trip across the field, is probably put 50% down in a pre-plant application, go put another 25 to 35% of my nitrogen load in an early side dress application. I'm talking emergence to V2, V3 type of applications, because I told you I get a lot of water and I have surface drainage problems. So, being able to get across the field is my biggest concern. And so I've got 80 to 85% of my nitrogen load on at my side dress time, and then putting on my last pass with some over-the-top rig. We've done it on about 4 or 5 fields. The returns are there. I could have wrote a 15 minutes just on that alone, but I feel like that's the direction that we're headed now. Other questions? I'd much rather answer questions and get through all my slides. None? Okay. So bear this number in mind. In my mind, just on my intensive nutrient management alone, I pretty well paid the freight for all the technology and data that I collect and use. I've got more examples as we go on. This is an interesting slide I drug out when John gave me my title. Back in 2006, 2007, we were setting in some of the economics we're looking at right now, and we were getting tons of questions from the crop IMS side. Well, why do I want to invest right now today in intensive soil sampling? This is 39,000 acres we had in the database, and I didn't take the 18 slides that led up to the summary. But if I had all the slides, you could see out there the total gain by doing intensive nutrient management was about $6.10 an acre. The total investment to get that per year was about $3.90, which turned out to be about $1.56 return on investment of using that technology. I'm pretty comfortable we can see those same exact numbers on our own operation. The one thing that's not built into that analysis is the agronomic impact for doing the right things. This is just simply taking the numbers of saying what soil tests tell us and what are we going to apply. If you build the agronomics, that's such a subjective number. I don't ever want to build that in because everyone wants to argue, well, did you really pick it up or really did you not? So now let's talk about comprehensive data analysis. Why do I spend $8.50 an acre for comprehensive data analysis? Because it lets me better understand how agronomic changes affected the profitability. I told you that one slide I wanted to understand the impact, the agronomic impact. Now I'm going to even get tighter into that and look at it probably in some cases in 60-foot grids. Where I told you I had RTK on everything. I'm really comfortable in the data set that I've got of saying if I applied this product here, I'm really comfortable with tying that yield to it. The only thing I don't like much is soybeans. Because I'm struggling whether a 40-foot swath with a 40-foot head am I getting all the variability I could possibly capture? Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get my dad to sell his 40-foot head, but I'm going to tell you I sometimes question, could I learn more if I had a smaller head? Helps me quantify the variability in fields. That same applies there. This technology allows you to conduct your in-your-field trials. By investing in technology, the universities do great research for us and provide a lot of interesting and valuable resources to us to learn from it. But now we can take what they've learned and apply them to our fields and see in our field trials of what happened. More years of data equals more possible questions that can be asked. Last but not least, I can't help myself. I say this every presentation I get asked. Multi-year data sets can only be assembled by first collecting that very first data set. So you may get done at the end of this and say, yeah, Jeremy, you know what? You're kind of a weird guy. But I think, what you're saying applies. Where do I get started? Collect your first set. And after you get your first set, are we going to learn a ton from the first one? Maybe not. But now we get a second one. And now we get a third one. Once we get to 3, we've got some solid learning that I feel okay about. We get to 6, 8, 12. It even gets better. I show this map up here, and I've got another Slido question. If you want to go ahead and put it up, we can begin to ask. The question is, if you're on the app, have you ever considered looking at multi-year analysis to guide in your field trials? So I'm going to talk about how we use technology to do that. Because we do a lot of in our field trials. I'm pretty fortunate. I got a 1,200-acre research farm for most intents and purposes. Dad's pretty willing to let me do about anything I can dream up, as long as you don't cost him too much. And so we do that. So here's an example. Here's just the soil type data. I throw it up there to show you that, yes, I do have some variability. And I'm going to call out this little band here because we did a trial, and I do have variability there, which is good because then I get to see the responses across a couple, 3 different soil types. More importantly, now I go in, and this is a multi-year analysis, so this would have had about 11 years worth of data built into it where I normalized the yield to look at my yield potential. So anything in the greens was 80 to 115% of average from year to year. So here again, you see this band I'm calling out here at the bottom. You know, there's a lot of yield potential there. And have we got any results yet, Kaylee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's all yes.
Oh, yes. Well, great job. I'm preaching to the choir again. So, I told you, I asked the question, who come up with the white knight that's going to save the world? Here's what exactly happened. We went and cut this band out at the bottom. Anyone remember the push for 100 bushel soybeans? Did anyone have that going around Ohio? I think in 2016, 2017, they both did it, where we put nitrogen on them, we put fungicides on them, we put insecticides on them. I'm pretty sure that sprayer threw the kitchen sink out once, but I missed it. We didn't get it documented. So we put one of those bands here, and let's take the next step and look at it. So I took my yield data and blocked that out. Here's where that trial was. We really went end to end, but I threw the end rows off because I told you, if you remember, 80% of my yield drag comes in the outside 120 feet of my field. I blocked that off. The yield response was 63.7 bushel. The rest of the field was, say, 60 bushel an acre. I don't want to tell you exactly what I had in that pursuit for 100 bushel yield. The ROI on that one was negative. So you know how many I did in 2017? 0. Do you know how many I think I'm going to do in 2018? Any guesses? You're wrong. I'm going to try 1. The economics tells me 0, but I saw enough in plant health and know what happened in some other factors in 2016 that I'm not sure I can replicate every year. I'm going to dip my toe in the water one more time. And it's going to actually go back in this same very field. The biggest difference is going to be double crop soybeans. And I've got a friend out of Oklahoma State called Brian Arnells. Anyone heard him speak? We're actually going to do a little work with him on this very field again, probably in that same block. Believe it or not, looking at putting potash on standing wheat. I don't talk about it, but my K test, I'll never talk about managing my K because I'm so bad at it. I cannot tell you what I need to do to fix my potassium test. I'm not give up trying, but we're going to go out and take a similar approach as the pursuit for 100 bushel, kind of in the same block, by looking at some applications of potassium through potash applications whenever we hit it with nitrogen here in the winter, and possibly laying a little more potash out right after planting of our double crop soybeans. Now, come back, and if you want me to come back a year from now, I can tell you how it went if you want me to. But yes, we're going to try it one more time. But are we going to do it whole scale? Absolutely not. So when we struggle and talk about the ROI, what happens if I wouldn't have analyzed data this deeply? Would I maybe be willing to look at it again? Because you know what? Just superficially, 4 bushel, even at these prices we got now, what? Not quite $40, give or take. You know, we're getting close to 40 again. We can't quite get $10, but getting close. $40, what did I spend to do it? I think I spent like 41 and a half. I come pretty close to breaking even. If I would have done all the application myself, I would have broke even on it. I might have dove off and tried it again. But when you really look at it and think about it and have all the data to back it up, that's why we chose the 0. Now, I'll just tell you this. These are not my fields, but I do have permission to share the data. Another application we're using is logging a lot of fungicide applications and looking at it across a lot of fields and a lot of geographies. And I try to use this to illustrate that the data needs to be more in a picture. Because if you just take this as a picture and you looked at that yield data alone, you could make the case that it's a no-brainer. And in a lot of cases, it probably is. You know, we looked at about a 5 bushel yield response to running a fungicide on these soybeans, I believe, in 2016. Another example, this was some same corn we also did in, I believe, 2016. Soybeans again in 2016. Here again is about a 3.5 to 4 bushel yield bump. The thing I call out is the whole field average alone was 62 bushel an acre. So just by looking at the surface, if you look at where that block was, pointer's not going to work. this is where the application was, you could easily say, well, look how much more reds where we didn't apply. No, we need to do deeper analytics of that and understand it. In this case, with prices and the overall yield, it did pay off to make that investment. So I challenge you to not just let the pictures drive the decisions and determine ROI. This is probably my favorite and a very clear, again, return on investment of technology. We have been struggling with soybean populations, planting populations. Anyone ever want to debate that one with me for a couple hours? Be more than happy. And my dad has been a guy, okay, we were always solid seeded. We had a drill, believed in 8-inch spacings. He bought a Kinsey 3600 planter, 16-row with the splitter, and oh my God, it's just like this shine of light come from heaven, and now we got a 15-inch row everything. But he made this big mistake. He didn't adjust his planting populations because we adjusted row spacings. So my cousin, who works for my dad and me, dreamed up this trial that, by God, we're going to prove to him that we can save him a half a bag of soybeans. Didn't know what the result was going to be, but what you look at is this is a varied population. And Trey, I talked to you earlier, I told you wrong. We started at 130 and went to 180,000 in 10,000 increments. When you look at the map, what did we learn? Looks like we got reds, greens, and yellows across the whole flipping thing. I don't know if you learned anything. You know what? We learned a very valuable lesson. There was absolutely no statistical difference in yield between 120,000 seeds per acre and 180 to 190,000 seeds per acre. So think about that for a minute. So my dad had been planting 175 because I could not get him to back him down. I took him this one piece of data. You know what? We're planting everything at 130,000 now. Take 40,000 soybeans and think what that costs per acre. What did the technology take to invest into doing it? Took a yield monitor and a planter that had the controls on it to do it. I'm going to say it cost me less than $4 an acre to do it. Any seed dealers in the room? What's a bag of seed going to cost right now? A bag of soybeans. We're all Liberty linked, so factor that in as well. $64. So we saved him a third of a bag, $20 an acre. Was that a wise investment in technology? Absolutely. And for full disclosure, we did cut that up and run some replications across it just because we saw so much varied in yield. Ironically, no matter how we looked at it, no matter how we sliced it up, no matter how we looked at it, the results was the same, no statistical difference. Hence, we've cut everything back. I got to tell a story on my father. I'm going to use this as another great example of letting technology drive your decision making. Let me check where I'm at. Ooh, I'm going to have to hurry. So we plant a lot of new hybrids and things like this. This is an example where the seed dealer come to my dad in the fall and said, guess what? We've got a new seed corn this thing is a rock star. It is going to out yield XYZ that's been your favorite for the last year and a half. Don't forget, 2 years and that sucker's an old man. You better learn a lot the first time you get it. So Dad calls me on the phone. He says, hey, how do I set this monitor up if I do split planter? Put one hybrid in one half and one half in the other. I said, we don't do it that way, Dad. Remember, we plant blocks so that if something goes wrong with one or the other, we can fix it. Too late, fat boy. It's in the planter. Tell me how to set the monitor now. So, needless to say, he got an education. We got it collected. Let me tell you another real story. I forgot to tell you, I'm the auger cart driver. So everything's my fault, and I'll accept that, okay? Follow me on Twitter. I entertain you all fall of all the stupid things the auger cart driver does. So we're harvesting this, and Dad's on the two-way radio. Yes, we still got them. And whoever said it, yes, they're really licensed. And he says, man, are you looking at this new hybrid? You see how good it's doing? I said, Dad, I hate to tell you, but you're wrong. Oh, no, I'm not. I remember how I planted this. I started on this side. It was in the right side of the planter. I said, well, I think you're wrong. No, I'm not. Okay. So we harvested that whole field. I said, Dad, you're wrong. He said, well, you go home and just process the data and call me when you get done. My dad always goes to bed at 9:30, whether we're farming or whether we're not. So he goes to the house by 8:30. We finally finished this field about 9:30, 9:45. He calls me on my cell phone. You got that data processed yet? I said, Dad, we just finished 10 minutes ago. No, I don't have it done. 10:30, he calls me at my house. Did you get that processed yet? Truth is, I did. But this is going to be so much fun, I was going to go tell him face to face. I said, nope, Dad, I hope to have it done by morning. Well, what are you waiting on? I said, I want to eat supper. Are you ready to go to bed? Yeah, I'm going to bed now. I said, good, I'll talk to you in the morning. So I get there. He calls me at 7:30 as I'm driving down. You got that processed yet? I'll talk to you when I get there. I'm only 3 miles from your drive. All right, fine. So I get there. I said, Dad, how big a rock star do you say that was? Oh, it was great. He's like, I said, well, how much do you have ordered? He said, well, 60 bags. I said, 60 bags? You made a big mistake. Because you want the numbers? 21 bushel worse. True story. He picked up his cell phone, called the seed dealer, says, I still want that hybrid, but can I have 16 bags instead of 60? We made that decision October 18th. Do you think we got the numbers we wanted on October 18th as to figuring out on February 18th and changing the seed order? Absolutely. Okay. Yes? What's that? Okay.
I want an addition on the house.
Okay.
So, weather data.
Can I get to that in a minute too? Okay. But yeah, go ahead.
No, that's without weather.
Yes. And I'll get to that in a minute. And I've definitely got to hurry if I'm going to get to that slide. Because that's an emerging technology. Because I think we do have some weather data that gets us close. But I'm looking at higher resolution of weather data, measured sources, and I'll get to that in a minute. Because you are exactly correct. So, back to the question about am I looking at tighter grid soil samples, and that question come from over here, someone about the frequency of my soil samples. This is 12 years worth of yield data where I went and factored in temporal stability. So how stable are my yields throughout year after year, and then also factored in just spatial trends. So is it traditionally a trending higher, trending lower? And these are combined into management units. So anything that's green, yellow, or the first brown is average yield and up to above average yield and stable. Anything in the peach and the brown colors are below average and stable yields. So what we're doing is we're evaluating, yes, we're doing grid soil sampling. We've always been chasing these pinks and browns and saying, how can we bring up the lower yielding up to where the higher level is? We've got a big enough data set now, we're about to say to heck with that. Because I can tell you right now, if you look at well below average and stable yield, there's about 2.3 acres of this brown right here. In this economics, I can't afford to plant it. And I can make the case, I could put that in a conservation program, and if I block off the outside, maybe even 80 foot of that, and put it into a buffer, quail buffer, or some other conservation program, I can probably return, I'm not going to lose $147 on average on that well below and stable yield. Plus I get the payment of a conservation program that might be maybe even $150, $180. I can likely return $300 an acre on those 2 to 3 acres of that farm. That's $600, $700 clear profit. So what we're doing is also looking at going in now in these high yield zones and potentially doing some either zone sampling or 1 acre type of sampling to see if there's more potential there. Maybe there's something we're missing. And maybe even the well above average and stable yield has more yield potential in it than what we know today. I can't tell you the ROI on that yet today because we've not done it. And is it going to get expensive to do 1 acre grid samples? Yes, it will. But let me talk, so I just don't run out of time, let me talk to some emerging technologies that I think is going to have a really positive ROI to our farm. We got some new sensors and we got IoT. And this IoT is where the weather piece is going to come in. So I think the new sensors, and I don't have an example to show you this, is this smart firmer. I think there's some potential there of having some very positive return on investment. I also think Veris technology with the UC3 machine with soil EC, soil pH, and on-the-go organic matter. And I've got an example of that, and I'll show you. I think that's really real. I've pulled a Veris a number of times just looking at CEC, and I've struggled to find some good correlation to make me understand how I can create that into ROI. Soil pH and organic matter, when I get done, little debate. And Dr. Shearer brought it up, but See and Spray technology by Blue River, I'm ready to buy it. I told you I'm a Liberty Link guy right now anyway, so we've been pretty fortunate today on the Roundup resistant weeds and things that we've been dealing with. But being able to to pick and spray and choose what I spray and other things, I think has some real potential. The two examples I've got is this Varus. So this is another field over here that I've run that same multi-year analysis on. I want to tell you my money shot's right through the middle. My outside is my problem once again. So this is actually a map of soil pH. And I called out my yield drag traditionally comes in the outside 120 foot of my field. Take a look at those numbers. Let's go one step further. Let's look at the raw data. Green is good, red is bad. Look at all my red results in the outside 120 feet of my field. We're talking 1 point different in soil pH. Did more data points just teach me something? I've been a soil sample guy for years. My first job in precision ag was pulling cores. Everyone said, never pull a sample within 120 feet of the road because it's not representative. Anybody heard that story? Guess what? I've done it since 1996. Maybe I've give up something in soil pH. Let's go to IoT. Does everyone know what IoT is? Where am I on time, John? Ooh,
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Just basically a concept of putting out a low-speed, low-bandwidth internet connection. You know, they're building these networks out now. I think it brings new learning in the future. Right now, they're focused on high-value crops and irrigation, but coming to row crops soon. Here's a coverage map from just a few months ago. This is where we already have IoT networks already in place where you could go put sensors on. I call this spot home right about here. I just got off a call as I was driving out here to this meeting. I'm about 95% certain you're going to see 3 new circles right around Olney, Illinois. Because I think we're going to put a network over our farm. Because I think I've got more data I want to collect. And to answer my question in the back, my goal and plan is to put a weather station on every single field. And the reason I want to do that is I think I had a rain event that happened on about 200 acres of my farm that no land-based weather station caught. Therefore, no modeling software caught it either. Because if you look at the corn we harvested, we raised the best corn off this farm we've raised in 6 years. I've got a weather station at my house. My dad's got a weather station at his farm. We have another weather station about the same distance to the east. Have about another weather station the same distance to the west. Nobody caught a rain event this summer. I'm talking 28 to 30 bushel difference on one field of corn. Showed nitrogen deficiencies. But I'm sitting here going, why in the world am I going to go throw any more money at a cornfield that right now looks like has 75 bushel yield potential? If I knew I had that rain event and had the soil moisture to support it, would I throw another shot of nitrogen on it when it showed a sign of deficiency? Absolutely. Now, whether I get that many weather stations and whether I win this battle is still yet to be told. But I truly believe higher frequency weather stations and then let interpolation models work on it to fill the gaps with a higher frequency has real value. I got 2 slides I use in every presentation. Alice in Wonderland is one of them. Anyone read Alice in Wonderland? Remember, she's walking through the forest and comes to the Cheshire cat in the tree at the fork in the road. She looks up to the cat and says, which way should I go? And the cat says, well, where do you want to go, Alice? Alice says, well, I don't know. And the cat says, well, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to make the case to you, if you want to maybe take the harder road, make a new investment that you haven't already made, by choosing to use technology and data, there's a positive ROI there for your farm. And I'm going to struggle. I'm going to challenge you. Let's figure out a way to turn technology and data from books into value. With that, we want to build our house of data, the steps to success, set a goal for yourself you hope to achieve, take an inventory of the data that you collect, take an inventory of the technology that you already own and understand how to collect data and the capabilities of that technology, pick a field or 2 to start, make sure everyone on your farm knows your plans and what your goals are. And if you feel like you need help, don't be afraid to ask someone to help you take that harder fork in the road and turn technology and data into ROI. I'll skip my summary and get to the last slide. You may think I'm weird. You may think I take a pretty hard path, but I'll just personally say, if you can't tell, I love to eat. And thank you for what all of you do in agriculture and to feed our whole country as efficiently and cheap as we do. And with that, I think I probably got 2 minutes for questions at most.
A couple minutes, but let's take some time here. Any questions for Jeremy while he's up here?
Yes? Primarily water hemp and mare's tail. Yes. 2 or 3. Yeah, we'll burn everything down early. And then, like I said, we're primarily no-till. So if we have any breaks whatsoever between our early burn down and planting, we'll hit it right at planting again. And then, irregardless, the only thing that stops us is too wet of fields. At 21 days, we'll hit it with a Liberty type of product then. Yep. So the question was, on the variable rate soybeans, what's my basis for changing the rate? Is that the question? Are we using topographical information, soil types? Yeah. So we're doing very little in a true full-blown variable rate scenario. We have done it a little bit. We let multi-year analysis primarily drive that, which seems to be somewhat correlated to soil types. But yeah, and a little bit to elevation. Elevation's probably truly the biggest because of ponding and other things more than anything else. Our farms are really flat. I'm fortunate. I'm 15 miles north of where it really turns into the hills of southern Illinois, so we have more ponding issues than anything. We knew it was going to be difficult to control the ponding, so that's why we went back to multi-year analysis. Thank you.
Jeremy, one of the questions came on Slido was, how can you make a, I think I'm trying to remember how it was phrased, but how can you make a decision on 1 year's data on your soybeans and say 135,000 was your optimal?
That was the only true side-by-side trial that we actually did. We actually took a few other whole field or kind of half fields and looked at it as well. We didn't go as low as what we did in that trial. We did some other trials where we was at Dad's 175. We dropped one field a side-by-side at 150, dropped another one to 130, and done some analysis on that to validate on some other fields what we saw was real in the side-by-side trials of it, and that's what we used for our foundation to make that wholesale change across the farm. I just used the one example because it's easier to explain.
Well, I want to ask you a question because this is a common comment or concern, but with your work, specifically through Ag Gateway and some of the proof of concepts, I mean, when are we going to get to a day and age to make life simpler for growers to be hooking up equipment? We'll put that in that terminology, but when I take multicolored fleets and try to make them work on my farm and they can connect up to work and I don't have to deal with all the overhead of time and headaches and stuff. So,
well, I'm going to throw a little bit of that back to you because one piece of that is the work out of AEF and the ISO 11783 group for making that piece interoperability coming between multiple brands. Around the data side, that's a different kind of story and different discussion there. On the data side, there's a lot of work being done in Ag Gateway with the ADAPT data model, and if you haven't researched that, please look out there. There is now a standard data model that software companies and hardware companies can deploy where they build an interpreter, for lack of a better word, that interprets proprietary formats back to standardized formats so that data interoperability is coming. The AEF group and the work of ISO has made huge advancements in bringing that plug and play. I'm happy to say I've witnessed it all. I didn't tell you, but I started in this industry in 1996. And the compatibility differences I've seen in the last 3 years is 5 times what we saw in the first 17. So we're getting there, John. You know, some of that's driven by this machine control side. Some of it's coming back to you as farmers, going back to the manufacturers and saying, look, I love your green, I love your red, I love your blue, or I love your yellow, but my whole farm's not that color. Can you support the ISO standard and be completely compliant and certified so that my equipment can talk to one another? Does that answer your question?
Sure. I think you summarized it pretty well, Dan. It's an ongoing thing, and we're getting to there someday. But
yep. Yep. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy.